My name is Jacob Adams. I'm a fitness and leadership coach. I help people just like you get to the next level. I'll be creating a video called Connecting the Dots. It comes from Steve Jobs' famous quote that says, "You cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking back." I started a newsletter in 2014 called Connecting the Dots. It made it to about 17 volumes or so. So this will be volume number 20 in video format. It's a great place for me to not have a structure as to what I'm going to say. It lets me, as a writer, get on here and instead of using the keyboard to express my thoughts, it's basically a video camera capturing the words that would normally be being typed right about here. And so, where do I begin? I begin in the concept of masculinity. See, masculinity in today's society has become somewhat of a controversial idea. Now, all the while, this has happened sort of beneath my nose, and I say that scratching my head, because who would have thought that something so important to society, to humanity, would be considered controversial? Now, granted, feminism or feminist or femininity is on some levels can be seen as the polar ballpark of this concept. Fair enough. And so why did all of a sudden meaning the last 50 to 70 years of development in societal history, masculinity come to the forefront as being thought of as derogatory? Toxic masculinity, or as in Jack Donovan's book, A More Complete Beast, be considered a potential throwaway concept as not necessarily needed for the human species to continue thriving. As a matter of fact, Jack Donovan, a proponent of modern, strong masculinity, a leader for a masculine ideal and movement, says that the people that say that masculinity is no longer needed are in fact correct. Wow. That's quite the statement. That masculinity, again, in today's modern world, with all of its systemization, you can go to Amazon right now and click a button without even entering your credit card, have something shipped to you, not necessarily even with one click shopping, get the product you desire shipped to you, whether that's canned tuna, beef jerky, walnuts, almonds, exotic chocolates, clothing for you to wear. Everything can be done online. I will venture to say that with the right thinking, a person doesn't necessarily have to leave their home in today's society. Meaning, if you can get everything shipped to you, all you have to do is to create a certain level of systemization for creating a revenue, and then you have inflow coming in, and as well as the products and things that you need to sustain life. All things being fair, again, you don't technically need to leave your house in today's modern world. This could be where Jack Donovan comes to the concept of masculinity is not needed. Again, this came as a big surprise to someone like me because, and I'm still typing, right? This is a video. To be fair, this is a newsletter that started with a keyboard, and so here it is. Still occurring with the fingers. Where does that leave us as men? Assuming that you've watched this far and you're not triggered by my thoughts, my clear rationale, my easy to follow logic, assuming that doesn't offend you, you're still watching, right? Where does that leave us as people? Where does that leave us as men? Does masculinity, with its proposed idea that no longer is needed, do we then logically dispose of a concept? Kind of a painful world to live in, really. If we take a moment and we are honest with ourselves, though, we can simply see that women have responded by a decline in masculinity as a societal average by in turn adopting physical strength. You can see this by some of the winners in the CrossFit Games. Now, naturally, side note, one cannot look at those bodies and think every woman wants to emulate to be as strong as Annie Thorisdottir or Katrin Davidsdottir or Camille LeBlanc, etc., etc. Many do. Many men find them sexy. Me being one of them. It doesn't mean that that is the new feminine norm. We still consider the thotties on Instagram sexy. We still find Victoria's Secret models sexy. Those are still consistent places to find sexy women. Now, all that aside, the traditional channels and ideals of sexiness still holding true, what I'm saying is that with the decline of masculinity by the male gender on a societal average, meaning not necessarily you, not necessarily me, but those men that choose to, through consciousness, through social engineering, through some sort of subconscious, whimsical depletion of their masculinity, maybe to have some sort of appeal to the opposite sex, have declined their masculinity. Now, those guys, that said, with the decline of their masculinity, we've seen an increase in women's leadership, an increase in women trying to pick up the slack is a great way to say it. Now, again, assuming you're still watching, you may think that that is far-fetched. But again, I think it only comes to be far-fetched because we are uncomfortable talking about things that are so sincerely raw as a society. We are somewhat uncomfortable with that level of grit in our loins, in our DNA to pick up the slack where there is a lack, right? I'm gonna write that one down. That one rhymes. There is a desire, a compensatory, evolutionary piece in our human makeup that in order to propagate the species, there is a need for masculinity, and this masculinity will come whether it be through the female gender or the male gender, meaning there will always be a need to provide, to protect, to lead, to develop strength, to establish logic and reason, to emulate and push to the higher levels of ideals, to develop values and tradition and camaraderie and brotherhood and the things that make masculinity so powerful. That will consistently be a need, and it will be picked up by whatever gender has the balls to do so. I remember back in 2012 or so, 2013, there was a friend of mine who would say she had the balls. And I would tell her, you're a woman, you don't have balls, you have ovaries. And this further adds to my point that this person was a single mom raising a daughter on her own. And I could only gather that she felt that she was being the man and the mom to her daughter. She felt that she was both. I myself have never raised a child by myself, so I cannot tell you that there is such a thing. I've actually been quite puzzled, but listening to my own rhetoric, I can now see that there is a type of slack that needs to be picked up by somebody, and if you're a single parent, the chances of you picking that up are going to be present. Now, again, we live in a time where this kind of clear-minded thinking is considered somewhat controversial. And it's quite sad that it is, because this is coming from a very sober perspective, a very sober, real dialogue, right? Again, the name of this video is Connecting the Dots. So, I wanted to get on here and talk about that. How masculinity is currently being looked at like some sort of dispensable commodity. And to be frank, I don't think that is in fact going to happen. I think that I'd propose the following idea more readily. I would propose the following idea more readily, and here it is. It's that this entire political landscape where men are being seduced into being placating submissives is in fact a maximum shit test by women to see if in fact men will do exactly as they're kind of told in the hopes of getting laid. And there it is, staring us right in the face. This forever friction of the desire to procreate, to have pleasure, to have sex. And now, on the table, we have the two genders on some sort of standstill, in negotiations where the men, in order to keep getting laid, have decided to supplicate, to placate, and to become some sort of androgynous energy, if you would. But the thing is that I would venture to say that in the docileness of that, one cannot gain an erection. Masculinity needs a level of a charge in the testicles. And so if a man is docile and placates and supplicates and becomes some sort of doormat to be walked on by the opposite sex in hopes of getting some sort of reward, like some lapdog, it's going to be difficult, just as you can imagine that lapdog, to gain a strong erection of conquer, of victory towards the opposite sex. So it's a catch-22, really. It's a catch-22. My battery's running out. I'll go ahead and cut this into another part. Anyways, the camcorder makes me cut it into two parts. So you could say this is chapter 1 of Connecting the Dots. And I will go ahead and begin the next one here in a bit. Yeah, hope you're enjoying this update of Connecting the Dots, Volume 20.